This is another in the series of the sermons of the Native American Church of the Ghost Dancers at www.ghostdancers.org. And today I'm going to give a further explanation and exposition per the request of some of the congregation of the church about a sermon that I just gave concerning the thunder beings, which are composed of the beings who are appertaining to the Watcher of the North, which is now absent. And that's why they're being so decimated and disrespected in a lot of different ways. That would essentially be composed of the two-legged thunder beings, which is the red root race, the Isobo, which is the wild mustangs or horses, and the Yanesh or bison. And these beings have sort of been relegated and treated in a very similar fashion per the nation states of the European colonialism. And they have sort of been treated per this doctrine of discovery, as I described in the previous sermon, as wildlife. One of the things I mentioned in the previous sermon were two landmark decisions of the United States Supreme Court, one by John Marshall in 1830 that adjudicated that the Edict of Discovery was a valid edict of the Christian kings in declaring them wildlife. And he used the term in regards to Native American Indians that they were incompetent individuals and the oxymoron dependent sovereigns, whatever that means, because I don't know how you could be a sovereign and be dependent at the same time. Now, the second landmark Supreme Court decision was one called Lone Wolf versus Hitchcock. This was a action brought by a Kiowa named Lone Wolf against the Secretary of the Interior, Ethan Allen Hitchcock. For those of you who are not aware of the situation with the Department of Interior, they oversee the regulation and decimation to a certain extent of Native American traditions, cultures, and peoples, as well as the current regulation and decimation of the wild horse scenario that's going on now per the Bureau of Land Management, which is under the Department of the Interior. That particular decision said that indigenous life did not have judicial review. They did not have rights in the courts. So that is why actions pursued on behalf of Native Americans or wild mustangs or bison in the courts are of no use in that regard. And that's why obtaining attorneys and filing actions in courts do not work in a particularly beneficial or expeditious manner. And because an attorney is an officer of the court, therefore it's out of his purview, since they do not have rights of judicial review in the courts. They're under the plenary power of Congress. So it requires a congressional act to adjudicate, or to not adjudicate, but to expedite a situation that would remedy some of these problems of extermination or decimations of indigenous life. Obviously, that congressional act would also have to respect that any administration of these indigenous species, whether they're two-legged or four-legged, would necessitate an authority set up that would be outside the purview of the administration of the U.S. government, which is in a situation of they're in a situation where they have a conflict of interest, let's say. Okay, now I'm just going to get into a little bit of the quick history about the equine species here in the Americas. The equine species was the oldest evidence of the equine species is here in the Americas. It's been hypothesized that they all died out in the Americas at the end of the last ice age, and they only existed in the eastern hemisphere, not the western hemisphere, which I contend is not entirely correct, because right here in California there are petroglyphs, pre-Columbian petroglyphs, of equine species drawn on rocks that attest to the fact that they did not entirely die out here. Not only did they initially arrive here in the western hemisphere in the earliest situation, but they also didn't entirely die out here. To a large extent, there was a repopulation or a reintroduction of some of the genetic species from Europe. And this was done in this way. The first aspect of it was done in what is now the United States by the expedition of Hernán de Soto in 1539 and through 1541. Now, I'll just give you a little quick history about the de Soto expedition. The de Soto expedition, when the Christian kings, and specifically the Spanish crown, decided that they were in this situation of the right of discovery of the Americas, they had a strategy to send 3 branches of military expeditions in order to subdue the indigenous population. One branch of the military arm was sent into Mesoamerica by Hernán Cortés. That in 1519, and that expedition was pretty successful. He was sent against the Mexica and Tenochtitlan, and he was pretty successful in subduing the Mesoamerican population of what is now Mexico and the Yucatan and parts of Guatemala. The second arm of the expedition was sent into South America, and it was headed by Francisco Pizarro, and they were to subdue the population of the Incas. And they were also very successful in doing so. One of the preeminent leaders of assistants of Pizarro was Hernán de Soto. He was called the hero of Cajamarca because he was so successful in assisting Pizarro in decimating the Incan population. The third arm of this military expedition was sent against the kings of